Hope everyone's well and welcome to this Connected Match Officials session this evening, where we're going to be talking a little bit about the Scrum. Just a few introductions. You should be able to see three people on screen. My name's Owen Taylor. I'm one of the match official developers with England Rugby. I'm going to be kind of taking us through the session with a little bit of help from the other two gents that are on screen. So I've got Kieran Henry and Harry Groves with me, and they'll tell you a little bit more about themselves. So Kieran, we'll start with you if that's all right.
Evening, everyone. Hope everyone's well. So I'm Kieran Henry. I'm also one of the match official developers with England Rugby, so work very closely with OT, and I'm also an assistant referee on the National League. So my sort of secondary input with OT and Harry, who we'll hear from now.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Harry Groves. I'm a referee in the Midlands, predominantly refereeing at Regional 1. So level 5. I'm also a member of the national team match official team associate group. So again, get to work with these guys every now and again. It's kind of that next stepping stone for myself.
Lucky lad, got to work with me at Leicester Lions, didn't you, the other week?
Great fun.
Yeah, exactly. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of a look around Scrum. So I'm just going to share the presentation now. So that should pop on your screen. From our perspective, what we're going to be looking for, you won't see my face. You'll just see Kieran and Harry. Hopefully, can still hear my voice. We're going to be having a little bit of a look around some questions that we've had in and around Scrum, but also this came off the back of our coherence exercise that we ran recently, and it was requested that we ran some stuff on Scrum. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of a look about what the Scrum engagement sequence looks like. We're going to have a little bit of a look at, from a referee's perspective and from an assistant referee's perspective, what we're looking for at each stage of the engagement sequence. And we've got some clips that are taken from the community game with some agreed outcomes and as to why we've come to those outcomes. So, Kieran, just to get us started in terms of crouch, bind, set, why is the engagement sequence important to know, and why is it important from our perspective that we've got to make sure that we stick to it and that it's very, very structured, and we've got certain jobs at each stage of the engagement sequence?
So primarily even, obviously our primary objective as match officials is regards to safety. So as with all the sort of approaches that we have within our refereeing toolkit, they are safety driven. So these three crouch, bind, set commands to the front rows allow us to have three distinct, separated approaches to that final end goal of the Scrum engagement sequence, and they all encourage that key word around the Scrum of stability. So we crouch and we get stable. We then get our binds on from our forwards, and we can maintain that stability, and then we can go to set, and then we maintain that stability through to that ball being put in, and then we've got a live scrummage.
Fantastic. So what we'll do is we'll just have a little look at maybe what that shape looks like. Hopefully quite a few people on the call will have heard of the phrase Tower of Power. And from our perspective, what the Tower of Power, if we see that from our front row, Kieran talked a lot there about stability and being in a good, safe scrummaging position. If we look at the pre-engagement on the left-hand side of the screen, we've got feet shoulder width apart and are parallel. We've got shoulders above hips. We've got the hips that are square in line and facing forward. And then we've got that head in that neutral position. So that's the pre-engagement Tower of Power. That would be when we're at crouch, and when we're at bind, we would maybe see one of those arms come forward, depending what side of the scrum the prop is on. And then if we move over to the right-hand side of the picture, when we call set, we've got that nice flat back. The core will be engaged because the scrum will be up in the air, and knees are bent into that 90 to 120 degree position. So it's a really strong, solid base for that player to scrummage and to compete for the ball and to restart the game. So at crouch, as we've said, it's all about having a positive body shape. You'll see and potentially hear referees talk about pictures, and we're going to talk a little bit about pictures. what that means is kind of things that if you were to take a snapshot of that space and time, what that player's doing, a negative picture would be something that we're not looking for. A positive picture would almost be like we can see on the screen there. So the pre-engagement tower power sequence, the player's going to lower their height and we're going to be ear to ear. It's important there where it talks about not being pre-engaged, and I'll come to one of the lads about why we don't want to be pre-engaged at the scrum. When we talk about considering heights, we want some level of consistency across the front row. From our perspective, we know we've got a game for all shapes and sizes and with all different heights. So sometimes that can be a little bit more difficult to manage. Say if you've got somebody that's quite tall scrimmage against somebody quite short, what do you as a referee, what things do you have to consider in terms of height? What does good look like for those two scrummagers? In terms of shoulders being visible, we talk about bringing shoulders through, normally, especially from the loose head prop. We'll talk a little bit more about scrummaging angles and things like that later, but we want to see 6 shoulders through, the tight head both shoulders, both from the hooker and both from the loose head. And then we're going to have that break foot. The break foot's going to be a little bit of a theme kind of running throughout the crouch bind set piece. So, Harry, from your perspective, if we see, feet underneath us, a good height, good shoulders, is that kind of the positive picture that you're looking for? Is there anything else that you'd be wanting to see on crouch, do you think?
Absolutely. It's all kind of that. It comes back to what you mentioned there with it being positive. Once you've kind of got that picture in your head of what a positive scrum, what a good setup looks like for you, the whole process becomes a lot easier. Again, I do think that space pre-engagement is really, really key. Just like most areas in the game of rugby, players are trying to win that space over each other. But obviously, it's particularly important at the scrum time from a safety point of view. If players are closing that gap, if we're not ear to ear, if we're pre-engaged, if we're heads on shoulders, whatever it may be, it usually means we've got weight coming through at a time we shouldn't, where players probably aren't prepared, and probably at a time where the opposition players' bodies probably aren't in the best position to receive that force or that weight coming through. So yeah, for me, probably the biggest thing around that whole crouch phase is getting that space right. If we get that space right, we generally tend to have a positive setup, which will generally lead to a good contest.
Fantastic. And Kieran, it says in bold at the bottom, allow balance and stability before calling bind. You obviously alluded to that in the previous slide. Why is it important that we do have that balance and stability before we move through the engagement sequence?
Put simply, it's because we're going to end up with a lot of moving parts if we don't have that stability, and that's just not conducive to a successful scrum. You're going to end up with things like pre-engagement, not being able to get proper binds because they're both grappling, etc. So it all comes round to just having that still picture where every member in that scrummage has the ability to react to the referee's commands without being all over the place, to put it bluntly.
Fantastic. So, like I say, positive body shapes. We've got them at a good height. We can see all the shoulders. The break foot's in from the hooker. Everybody's balanced and stable. We're going to move forward to bind. So when we see that, we're going to call bind. So where can the players bind? We've obviously got the back and the sides. It says there in red about avoiding arms and for safety. Kieran, why? Not only does binding on the arm a bad picture, but why does it implement that safety problem for us?
Because quite simply, the bind, if the prop decides to bind short on the arm, the likelihood is that that prop is going to pull his or her opposition man or woman's bind down, and therefore the scrum itself will not be stable and more than likely will go to ground, which is obviously a big safety concern of ours.
Fantastic. And the other thing we've got as well, if we're binding sort of in and around the armpit or on the arm, the player that's binding over the top has quite a lot of control of that player that's bound underneath. And we want that fair competition, don't we? So you'll probably hear a buzzword of long binds or clean binds. That's what that means, being bound on the back or the side of your opposition. Again, we talk about positive pictures, so elbows being high and long binds. They're kind of the buzzwords that we're using, and it's language that I think players are used to hearing now as well. We hear it on the telly and it filters down, and I think long binds and staying high is something that's quite well known now. And the other thing is the break foot again is going to be staying in place. Harry, why? Obviously, the break foot was on crouch as well as bind. What is the break foot, and why is it important that it's maintained all the way through?
So the break foots means that the hooker always needs to have one foot in front of the other. Essentially, it comes back to the point we just touched on of stability. The break foot there is to give the player stability so that the hooker can control that weight that's going forward. It prevents all sorts of safety issues we could come to again with players loading through heads and necks, which is obviously something we really don't want. So ultimately, that break foot there is to provide that stability throughout, so that both sides can control their weight before that engagement or before the ball's in.
Fantastic. So at this moment in time, we've called crouch, we've called bind, we've still got no pre-engagement. We're still balanced and we're ready to call set. So once players have had a little bit of a shuffle, I think the important thing to remember is that on bind, we're going to have quite a lot of movement. Players are going to be adjusting, players are going to be trying to reach their bind. They might not be 100% successful first time, so they may sort of readjust. The big bit from my perspective is that the biggest sort of amount of time between calls is between bind and set. Give time for players to adjust, find their feet, move their foot position, things like that. So once we're balanced and stable, we're going to call that set. And that's when we move into this post-engagement tower of power picture, which you'll be able to see on the screen. So, what does that look like? We've got, knees underneath hips at 90 degrees. We've got a nice flat back. The players in the air, the blue players in the air, good sort of bind that's nice and long on the back and the side of the red player. Feet are in the ground. It's a nice, strong, solid base to work from. So kind of the other bits that are on there, if we've got that good shape, Harry's talked a little bit about no pre-engagement, but we've also got no early drive as well. And being able to, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is we've got safety. If we think about our cell refereeing, safety, equity, enjoyment, learning and laws, we've got a lot of equity and we've got a lot of safety involved in the scrum. So, no early drive or early wait, so that the team that's done that has got an unfair advantage on their opposition. We've put in there, it's a pushing, not a pulling competition. Kieran talked about pulling players to ground. We want to see movement forward. We don't want to see up and down. We want to see moving forward through the mark and driving straight and driving square. And again, that break foot can now move back because the hooker will be in a position to strike for the ball. Give the scrum, after it's set, time to balance and be stable before the ball comes in. So from your perspective, Harry, is there anything else that we've kind of talked about in that crouch bind set phase that you'd be wanting to look for, or what are your maybe key triggers to thinking something's not right and I need to reset this?
One of the big things that seems to be around at the moment is not to forget about the back rows as well. What are particularly our number 8s doing? Are they looking to slingshot? Are they actually bound and engaged in that scrum throughout? Again, if we've got number 8 slingshotting, causing that instability, particularly on the set, it gives us another safety issue. So just being aware of what those back rows are doing. Are they bound with that full arm? Are they always connected to the scrum? And again, with the number 8, just for you kind of reference, what channel is he kind of sitting before that ball goes in?
So what do you mean by slingshotting? Sorry, that might be a new phrase to some people.
So what a lot of number 8s will try and do, they'll kind of bind onto the second rows with their hands and then throw their weight forward on the engagement. So they will hang out of the scrum, and when they hear the set, they'll fly in themselves with their shoulders into the second row, which then, as you can imagine, then kind of sets off that chain reaction of players jerking forwards, and then consequently the front row generally tend to lose that stability going forward.
Fantastic. Kieran, is there anything else maybe outside of the front row? Harry's talked a little bit about the back row. Obviously, we've got 2 back lines to consider as well. The scrums, it's a really complicated part of the game in terms of it's multifaceted. There's lots of stuff happening all at once. What, from your perspective, maybe as an assistant referee, how does your role change potentially scrum to scrum?
Yeah, so dependent on referee position at scrum time, if I'm the opposite AR to the referee stood, I will be on and in line with the tunnel. So I'd have a sort of clear view of the opposite tight head and loose head to where Owen or whoever maybe refereeing is positioned. And I'd have overall responsibility for any offences that may be on my side. Conversely, if I'm on the referee's side, it's very much my responsibility as that AR to ensure primarily that the defending back line is back the 5 metres, but I've also got to be aware of the attacking back line as well, because it is sort of creeping in more at set piece, scrum and line out to an extent where you'll see the attacking back line encroaching in those 5 or 10 metres. So it is certainly a focus as assistant referee, offside line wise, non-participants in the scrum.
And of course, if you were on your own on a Saturday, you've got to manage those things as well, which is why obviously the scrum is a difficult part of the game. You know, it's a tough part of the game to referee. So brilliant. So we'll move on now. Again, we've talked a few little considerations. One is probably about the feed. It's allowed to go in on the loose head shoulder. That's one thing. From a credible perspective, what does credible look like? We don't want to be feeding it into the number 8's feet. But the other thing to consider is, the scrum is a way of restarting the game. That's the purpose of a scrum. So again, credible is what credible is to you and in your environment, but just one of the considerations. Scrum half's on side, out of the space between the flanker and the number 8. That's another person that we have to manage, during the scrum is what is the opposition 9 doing, trying to get in that space. Are they onside? Are they offside? Putting pressure on the 9. We've got another player to manage in there. And is the ball available to play? Like it says, what's the purpose of a scrum? If the ball's available to play, everything's nice and safe, everything's up in the air. Let's get that attacking 9 using the ball. But most importantly, and I think we'll all agree on this call, is that bit in bold at the bottom. Safety is absolutely paramount within the game. If it doesn't look right, we need to stop it or sanction it. If you're not 100% sure, who you need to be penalising, if it might be 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, we blow our whistle nice and loud. Everybody stands up and we reset the scrum and we go again. So we have got some clips from the Papa John's Community Cup last year. So this is the Counties 2 North Plate final, which was at Darlington Moden Park between Wath-upon-Dearne and Ripon Rugby Club from Yorkshire. What we're going to do is we're going to see the clips 3 times in real speed, and then myself, Harry, and Kieran will go through our agreed outcomes and maybe have a look at some of the key coaching points from the clip. So here's clip number 1.
Come on, gents, let's go, please. Follow. Crouch. Bind. Set. Come on, gents, let's go, please. Follow. Crouch. Bind. Come on, gents, let's go, please. Follow. Crouch. Bind.
So hopefully a fairly nice and easy one to get us started, Harry. What are you kind of seeing at that scrum? Obviously, we've got the agreements on screen, but just take us through from your perspective what you're seeing from that camera side.
Yeah, so a way I'd kind of describe the picture that we're seeing in that scrum is that blue loose head is never positive. If we look at him throughout that setup, his hips are never parallel to that 10-metre line. It's quite a good guide to use there. We can see his outside foot is always probably too far forward. From the start, you can see there's only one way he's going, and that is in at an angle and down. He's never positive. He's never looking to stay up. He's never looking to stay square. From the start of that scrum sequence to the eventual end, he is always looking to go in and straight to floor on that scrum there.
Fantastic. So, Kieran, from your perspective, who do you think has made this call on the day? Well, that's the first question. Who do you think's made the call on the day?
That would 99% sure. I would say that is an assistant referee call. So the guy in the bottom right is assistant referee. I'd be very surprised if that's not his call there.
Fantastic. So again, luckily enough, we've got assistant referees on this game. It's a big final. You know, if you're on your own potentially and you're the referee stood where the referees currently stood, what might be your options? Do you think there?
So either if you're not confident that you've seen a clear and obvious offence from one another, you could use a reset, or potentially if you believe that side is going to be your issue, so to speak. If there's an issue at scrum time, you could potentially switch your position to the opposite side. But having said that, this scrum is obviously very close to the touchline, so it does take away a little bit of your space, should we say, if you come onto that blind side.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think the key points there is you can see kind of on the arrows and the little squiggles, you know, the blue loose head's very long. If we look at the shape of the red tight head, so the player that's further into the scrum, you know, we've got a little bit more of that Z shape as opposed to that L shape that the blue loose head has as well. So not only are they on the angle, like Harry says, that they're a little bit long. We would want those feet underneath us, which would give us a better platform to scrummage in terms of height, and that's probably why they go to floor. So we would be looking to penalise the blue loose head for collapsing the scrum. We're all happy with that one? Okay. So scrum number 2, same game all the way through.
Crouch. Bind. Set. Crouch. Bind. Set. Crouch. Bind. Set.
So, Kieran, I'll come to yourself about what we're kind of seeing at the scrum itself, and then Harry, I'll kind of come to you, ask a little bit about what options you might have there as the referee to do in that instance. So, Kieran, what are you seeing from that scrum?
Yeah, so I mean, we've clearly got a dominant red scrum, and we can see they right from the moment that scrum is set and the ball comes in, they've got clear and obvious go forward from both sides of that scrum. That could be seen with blue initially going backwards, and then as you see the blue tight head pops up and it sort of flings round from towards the touchline in terms of that blue scrum.
Fantastic. So again, it says at the bottom there, you know, we've got the red loose head looks like to be in a good scrummaging position from the far side. From our perspective, you know, red tight head looks good. Blue tight head goes back, even though they're going back. You know, the referee blocks it a little bit on the camera, but they seem to be going back fairly legally. You know, the issue that we do have is that on the far side, obviously, is the blue tight head standing up under pressure. From your perspective, Kieran, do we think that if, for example, if we don't have Rebecca running touch on the far side, putting that call in, is that a call that the referee can give from his side credibly, do we think?
I would argue for this one, there is a pretty high degree of credibility, as we can see in that second image. You know, the tight head stands up. You see only him pop out of that scrum. So you know that will certainly be a sellable decision if you decide to go down that route as a referee only on the day. So excuse me.
Fantastic. And Harry, so if we consider what's happened and we think about, you know, red have gone forward and they've actually won they've won the scrum against the head, what would you be looking to do as the referee, do we think here?
It's definitely one that needs to be penalised, and it's probably one that we need to be quite sharp on the whistle with and quite quick in actually stopping that game. Obviously, the blue tight head stood up, which could cause all kinds of issues from a safety point of view, with that scrum twisting, turning, and that scrum is probably going to go to floor. So from a safety point of view, we probably want to be quite quick on that whistle. As you said, they've turned that scrum over anyway, so there's probably not a likely chance that there's any decent advantage to be played anyway. But obviously safety's got to be the first port of call here, particularly at scrum time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the last thing we want is 16 bodies going to floor in that situation. If we give it nice and quick, I think that would be a great decision. And look, Wath would be really happy. You know, they've won not only have they got the ball back, they've got a penalty out of it as well. So yeah, fantastic, good stuff. So let's have a look at the third clip. So the agreed outcome that we had from this one was that Red's loose head, lots of weight on the outside leg, and the first movement is left. So you might hear that described as going round the corner or following round. The blue hooker stands up and drives across the scrum. We can kind of see from the arrows, ideally, like Harry said, we can use the pitch guides as a bit of a line. Lines as a bit of a guide, sorry, and the grey arrows is where we would want people to be driving. We can see we've got the blue one standing up, we've got the red one going across the scrum. The scrum goes round on the mark with no team clearly going forward. So we kind of talked about this being a good one to reset. It says there about reminding the loose head to drive straight and the hooker to stay down. Harry, why, when we reset a scrum, do we think it's important to give something to the players? Why is that important for us?
We don't really want players guessing at what we want to see, particularly, again, at scrum time where it can get quite messy quite quickly. If we're really clear in what we expect and what we want to see, that kind of takes it off us and puts it back on the players to make those improvements. If we go to the next scrum from this one and the loose head still looks to be like he's stepping around, it's a really easy decision for us to give, having already warned him about what we the picture we want to see and how we want to see him improve from this scrum here.
Fantastic. Kieran, what would you look to say to the players? Would you address both individuals? Would you address the whole scrum? What do you think you would do in that situation?
I think purely for equity, we'd look to address both players. So obviously in this instance, we've identified that the red loose head, his setup angle isn't great, so he always looks like he's slightly on the angle in towards the hooker. Then obviously we identified that the blue hooker then stands up, so we can address both. And obviously red loose head, straight and square, please. Hooker, stay in the scrum. And then there's the equity piece that you're not saying one or the other has ultimately caused it. You're trying to get both to buy into your process.
Fantastic. And from your perspective, Kieran, do you think this is a good reset option? We talk about resets being an option for us. Mm-hmm. Why do you think in this case a reset is a good outcome, do we think?
Obviously, yeah, it is in this instance absolutely a good option. You've not clearly got you haven't clearly got go forward like we've seen in some previous examples, and B, it's extremely hard to give a decision either way when you can identify a potential offence by both sides. So once again, just for equity piece, how can you reward someone if they've also got an offence within their team as well?
Fantastic, super. So we do, funnily enough, as Harry kind of alluded to, we do have another similar scrum in a similar area of the pitch not long after this one. So we'll have a look at that one now.
Oh, what happened? This could be a huge, huge moment in this game, couldn't it?
Yeah, this is definitely could be an opportunity to turn the game around for WAF. And if they're clever with it, they can take a decent lead as well.
Trying to get the drive on. Drive's gone. Oh, what happened? This could be a huge, huge moment in this game, couldn't it?
Yeah, this is definitely could be an opportunity to turn the game around for WAF. And if they're clever with it, they can take a decent lead as well.
Trying to get the drive on. Drive's gone. Oh, what happened? This could be a huge, huge moment in this game, couldn't it?
Yeah, this is definitely could be an opportunity to turn the game around for WAF. And if they're clever with it, they can take a decent lead as well.
Trying to get the drive on. Drive's gone.
So if we start kind of talking a little bit about the referee's positioning, Harry, why do you think the referee has potentially chosen to stand there instead of the other side of the scrum, closer to the post?
I think it's probably because of issues he's had earlier in the game. We've seen before with that side, there's been penalties that have gone both sides. He's gone that side to probably really own that decision if it needs to be made, particularly late on in a big game like that. He really wants to make that decision his. He's had to work quite hard with both props, the loose head from red and the tight head from blue throughout. So sticking to that side really puts them under pressure to stay legal.
Fantastic. Just to get stuck into the nuts and bolts of the actual scrum itself, obviously that we can see from the arrows, red's in a really good square pushing position. You know, they're all going forward. We've spoke to the loose head and we've asked them to get a little bit squarer and they've listened to us. Blue, again, we've seen them go backwards in this game and they've done a good job at times of going backwards. You know, we obviously had the tight head late stand up and we've had the loose head that stayed in the contest really well. But once they start going back under pressure, we can see the black arrow, the far side of the scrum. The blue loose head drives up and into the tight head, really close to the line, and the scrum starts to lose some of its structure. Kieran, what would you potentially be expecting to see there, or what would we potentially be looking to give? But also, why is it very hard for the match official to not give that? Obviously, it says on the screen about a penalty try, yellow card. Why is it hard for them to not be able to do that necessarily?
Well, yeah, as it says there, you know, I think ultimately we would expect a penalty try in this situation. You know, the blue scrum effectively disintegrates when it gets about a metre or so away from the line when the red 8 tries to pick the ball up and then fumbles. It's difficult. I mean, knowing the context as well, there'd been at least one, possibly even 2 yellow cards against blue. So they were down to their 2 remaining props. So if there'd been any more penalty, if there'd been a penalty try, which says obviously that we have to give a yellow card, we would have ended up with uncontested scrums.
Yeah, and look, that's tough. I mean, I think potentially would a good outcome be, or a potential outcome here, you know, the referees, the far side, we may not be able to identify an exact offender. You know, do we get the loose head necessarily? Do we still potentially think that we've got the opportunity to go under the sticks with a penalty try and not show a yellow card, or what do we think, Kieran? I understand that these situations are tough. I suppose it's trying to get it as right as best we can, isn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, we do always have that option. You know, you at a scrum situation, if you decide that a penalty try is warranted, you know, you could deem that you've not got a single offender. You know, so you could what call it, get out of jail, but you know, you're quick to the blue side and also to the red would be that you couldn't identify a single offender, and you can't go around giving 2 for yellow cards for the same offence.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So a really good forward scrum, and this is kind of the scrummaging that we'd like to see a team really in good positive positions going forward and winning that battle legally. So that's fantastic. So we'll go on to the last, I think it's the last scrum clip of the night. So it's kind of a tale of another loose head today. The tight heads were doing a fairly good job in this game by the looks of things. The red loose head first movement, again, it's to step left, very similar to the reset that we had where their loose head steps left. But in this instance, the hooker stays down and blue are all legal. Drives across the scrum, again, it's that step in left that we talked about, and they kind of run the scrum round the corner a little bit. So we'd potentially looking at the penalty against the red loose head for not driving straight. From your perspective, Kieran, how do we think the referee could try and add a little bit of stability? We didn't talk much about cadence, but how could the referee help add a little bit of more stability in this scrum, do we think?
So I think certainly at some points his engagement sequence is a little bit quick. So we could potentially slow it down, really get that buy-in from both the front rows in terms of being nice and stable once each command's been given. So a nice crouch, and we've got six front row forwards crouched in a good position, nice and still and stable. Then we can bind. Once again, get some good binds up, bit of stability, and then we go to set, rather than sometimes that potentially the gap between the each call was a little bit too short potentially.
Fantastic. So Harry, from your perspective, obviously it's the clock's in the red, there's 2 points on offer. Ripon have got a really good kicker that's kicked really well during the game. Why is this a big decision to make potentially? Because you could argue the ball comes out on Ripon's side, and do we want to play away? But why is this a big decision, do you think?
Yeah, it's a big decision because it looks like the red team are actually go forward. That's what it probably looks like. If you took a step back and couldn't see that smaller detail, it looks like they're probably the dominant scrum there. But obviously, what the referee has from his view, and we have from what we can see on the camera, we can see that smaller detail, which is that dominance is caused by him stepping to the left and stepping around. So it's all about cause and effect, really. Why have they gone forward? Well, it's because he stepped out and around. It's probably not what everyone from a distance expects to see, but it is the right call.
Yeah, and if we think about pictures that we talked about at the start, there's no flat back. We're on an angle following the red arrow. The bind's really short. We can see that the red bind's really short. Still quite long-legged. We're not in that good sort of bent knee position. So if we think about our post-engagement tower of power that we saw earlier in the slide deck compared to this from the loose edge, I think that's a really good example of a good picture versus something that we're not looking for. Kieran, put us out of our misery a little bit with are there any other offences that we see? There is something else that happens in this clip that would be a penalty. We had to watch it about 3 times before we just went, oh, has that happened? So do you want to tell us a little bit about what happens and why it's illegal?
We did, yes. Even we didn't notice. So yeah, I mean, the first offence absolutely is the red loose head on the angle. But what we do have is a second offence by the blue open side flanker who uses his hand to push the ball back towards his number 8.
Okay. So we said before potentially that you know, we reset the loose head angle and the hooker standing up. Is this something that we would reset, or would we look to give a penalty against either red or blue? Which would we go for?
Well, I think obviously we saw it done, didn't we, LT? And we were 99.9% confident that the first offence was by the red loose head on the angle first, and then we had the blue flanker using his hand to play the ball back in the scrum, which once again is a penalty offence, but it will be the secondary offence. But what that means is that we shouldn't be playing our advantage. We should be pinging straight away for that first offence, because we've got 2 offences, 1 by each side.
Fantastic. No, really good. So again, penalty against the red loose head for not driving straight is probably a good outcome from this one, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So other considerations, we've just got a few things for people to think about. We talk about a nice and slow cadence on crouch bind set. Kieran alluded to that. You know, it gives players chance to adjust and alter their position and get in that nice, stable, legal pushing position. Setting a decent gap, not too big, not too small. Harry talked a little bit about, you know, if we're pre-engaged, the problems that we have. But similarly, if the gap's too big, you know, we'll have players overbalanced, and you know, we won't have that good stable platform. So, to be honest, the best thing that we can do in this circumstance is speak to the front row. You know, in our pre-match brief, we can say to them, if you're not happy, talk to me and we'll stand up. You know, it's absolutely not a problem. That's managing the scrum, you know, is by going, you know, if the props aren't happy, you know, get them to talk to you, because they're the ones that are going to be bending over and scrummaging. If you're not sure and it's not safe, you need to stop it and reset it. Like I say, tell the players what you're seeing. Harry talked about that. Whatever you're seeing, you know, if you tell the players, they can be the ones that make that adjustment and make the scrum better next time. We need to see that they're scrummaging in that safe and legal position. But certainly, you know, if it's not safe, we need to be stopping it, and a reset or a penalty to be given. And is the ball available to play? We said that right at the start, you know, remembering that the scrum's away, restarting the game. If the ball's available, the scrum's safe and stationary, let's look to play the ball away. You know, let's call our number 8s and our scrum halves to play the ball away. So that's everything from our slides that we've got. We do have a couple of questions that have come in, and we'll kind of whiz through a couple of these for you. We've got Tyke from Manchester and District says, if you had to give 3 pieces of advice to provide the best chances of providing a safe and successful scrum, what would they be? Harry, I'll come to you for that one.
3 bits. First one for me personally would be, let's get our cadence right. So we're in control of that cadence, the time between the crouch and the bind, and then the bind and the set. We are in control of that, and it's really important we remember that. Make sure the cadence goes off the pictures you're seeing in front. Not every scrum will be exactly the same with the pictures you're seeing. So give the players their time to get their setup right. Second bit would probably be invest in the setup as a whole. So take that time to get your space right, to put that clear mark on the floor, set your space right, and again, have a look at the scrum as a bigger picture. What are the back rows doing? Are we all starting legal, essentially? And third piece of advice would be, don't be afraid to speak to the front rows. Some of them are big, scary guys. Don't be afraid to speak to them. Again, tell them what you're seeing. Tell them what you want them to change. And generally, they are actually pretty good at doing that. So don't be afraid to actually speak to them to prevent any problems later on down the line.
Yeah, I've never known a single prop who's not happy to talk about scrums in the bar afterwards. 100%. Kieran, I'll come to you for this one, and this is a really good point from John that comes in that final clip. Do we have a danger that because Red have had a really good scrum all the way through the game, in our mind, maybe unconsciously, we're always looking for blue offences? How do we keep that equity and fairness in mind? You know, how do we not get swayed by what's happened previously?
Yeah, I mean, so absolutely yes. That there is that danger that subconsciously, because we've seen a clear dominance from Red previously, that we expect that to continue. But it is massively important to sort of approach each scrum as like an independent event. So just because a team, and in this case the red team, has been going forward and has had dominance, it doesn't mean that they'll continue to do so legally. So it's important to ensure that both teams are treated equitably. Just because Blue might have given away 3 previous scrum penalties doesn't mean that because this scrum now goes wrong that it was caused by them, which obviously we saw, and we've decided that the red loosehead in that particular case was the cause. So it's just keeping that open mind that every single scrum on its own merit is an independent event.
Absolutely, no, really good. And we talk a lot about refereeing process, and if we have a good process and we have those pictures in our mind, having the opportunity to go, these are all individual isolated instances, then we have that opportunity to referee each event separately. Craig asks, does there have to be a pause between the ref calling set and the ball going in? Harry, why is that little pause important to us?
So the pause is important. Again, it comes back to stability. We want that scrum to be stable after the engagement. So the engagement's one of the times in the scrum where there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of things that could go slightly wrong or not give us that stability. We want that good, strong, stable platform for the ball to be able to go in. There's no point putting the ball into something that is already on its way to floor, or we already have players starting to mess around.
Fantastic, really good. I'll just skip a couple of questions on because this is another. It's kind of linked, I suppose. And this is from Derek. Could you clarify or differentiate between a perceived early push and when actually it may be the other way round and a pack taking a step off? Kieran, anything from you? Obviously, it's a very difficult thing to pick up on. What do you think on that one?
It is. I know. I agree, OT. I mean, yes, it can sometimes be a tactic. But if a team deems that they're potentially under pressure, they may try to paint a picture to you that their opposition is driving early. That very much obviously comes down to the viewpoint that you as a referee have. Obviously, be absolutely confident that what you're seeing is an early push rather than the supposed non-offending team not or taking a step back or not taking that hit as we'll call it. When we get to set. So it could potentially be somewhere that you could use a reset first time to say, look, you hold your drive, you make sure that that you're not stepping off. Just once again thinking of that equity piece.
Yeah, fantastic. John puts a really good point in around the second. I think the second Ripon 5 meter scrum sequence. We're saying that would it be a consideration for us to have if potentially a team doesn't have 8 players in the scrum? Now, obviously, unless we're at uncontested scrums, we wouldn't need 8 in that scrum. If Ripon wanted to put 7 or 6 in that scrum, they certainly could. The big consideration from our perspective, John, is probably around what we want to be seeing from the props in that circumstance. If a loose head prop doesn't have a flanker, potentially keeping them in. If we see them starting to step left a little bit more and staying a little bit less tight to the scrum. Same with the tight head, I suppose. It's all about what effect is a player not being there. What's it likely going to affect to have on the prop on that side? Charles puts in, if a loose head wishes to bind above the tight head's arm, and this results in there's a few asterisks here. So I'm going to say I'll use the phrase messing about, Charles, if that's all right, on bind. How do you think you would manage that? So maybe 2 players trying to get the bind at the same time. Harry, what would you look to do in that situation, do you think?
Again, it's one of those moments where you're going to have to use your communication skills there. You're going to have to call both players out and just say, look, again, and it falls back to your cadence again. make it very clear. I will give you the time to get your bind, to get a nice, long, strong bind. And again, probably look at how you're setting your space as well. If you give them the right space, then they're more likely to get that bind. But again, yeah, just communicate with those players, and it will generally do the trick.
Yeah, I think from refereeing, you know, thousands and thousands of scrums, I think the tight head tends to want to bind first. You know, from my perspective, and that's probably my pictures when the scrum's building. I think if the loose head gets the bind first, generally the tight head wouldn't want to go in and scrummage in that. And again, this comes back to the pre-match brief of if you're not comfortable, tell me. You know, if a tight head's not happy because they haven't got their bind first, you know, they may even just stand up and go, I'm not happy to go in, you know, so we'll reset again, think about the space, think about our cadence and the time that we're giving them. Fantastic. Horace talks about, can we comment on the positioning of referees? So we alluded it a little bit kind of through the call, I suppose, where we talked about if we've got a problem side, you know, we stay on that side. If we've got assistant referees, maybe we'll be try and stay in field as much as we can so that we've got a view of both sides. But I completely appreciate, you know, the number of officials going out there with assistant referees is kind of almost negligible, I suppose, compared to the whole game. But Kieran, where do you think you would potentially start the game? And depending what happens, how would that vary on your positioning, do you think?
I think largely as referees, for a bit of energy preservation, we always like to be in field. So, you know, and if that works for us and we have a nice clean scrummage, then great. But having said that, we've got to be prepared if we need to, and we have got an issue on one side, and it happens to be the short side, the blind side. Don't be afraid to go on that side and sit on those two prop forwards to ensure that you get a successful scrum. Because it's better to invest in the scrum rather than to blow your whistle and penalise something that you've not tried to remedy. Yeah,
I think probably as a little bit of a rule of thumb, we would probably start on the scrum half side, because they're another pair of players that we do have to manage as part of the scrum engagement sequence. You know, they might ask, which way are you going to step? Are you going to step left, step right, step back? You know, start building those relationships and use our effective communication to be able to, you know, work with those players as well. So like Kieran said, I would probably start on the scrum half side for the first scrum. And then I would be a case of, where does the scrum need me to be, you know, rather than where do I want to be. Super. Look, so we've got no more questions in the chat box. Thank you so much for everybody that's put some questions in. They're fantastic. And I suppose that just leaves us to say, you know, this will be available on keepyourbootson.co.uk. It'll be part of our training offer on there, and it's obviously going to be available on demand. So if you do want to listen to it all over again, please do. And it just leaves me to say a huge thank you for Harry for giving up his evening to talk to myself and Kieran, and congratulations again on getting on the National League Match Official Team Associates program. It's a huge achievement, mate. So well done to you on that. And from everybody else, we will see you hopefully in the not too distant future for another Connected Match Officials team session. So thanks, everyone.